which in many respects are the absolute opposite of the things we must work toward in gaining anthroposophical insight. I always take great care to take into account what must be taken note of as I try to establish the difference in tone needed for a public lecture, as distinct from speaking to our anthroposophical friends. And we should get in the habit of really maintaining this difference. Perhaps people who are still far from familiar with anthroposophy will not like what is said to them, but we need not take this for something undesirable, providing we are aware that we have presented things to them which their souls need at that time. But when we are amongst ourselves, as it were, we truly must endeavor to go more and more deeply into things. Certain truths that are indeed extraordinarily important and significant for the present time, truths we must deal with amongst ourselves, so that from that point they penetrate more and more deeply into the cultural life of the times, cannot yet be put openly and plainly before the general public. This is something we must properly understand. Let us assume we talk of something which plays into human life all the time, of the way in which all human life on earth is penetrated by the Ahrimanic, by the Luciferic powers. Or we talk of certain things that relate to the life between death and rebirth. We need to avoid talking too freely of these things to people who are not prepared, but not because of something that often comes up particularly in a society like ours, something we might call a degree of mystery mongering, with most of the people involved not even having a real idea as to why this is going on. What should prevent us from talking too freely about these things to people who are not prepared is that people who are not prepared are unable to be really serious about these things and do not consider them in sufficient depth. For anthroposophists, the terms Ahrimanic, Luciferic powers should gradually become something of such significance in life, something that touches them so deeply in their feelings and sentience when spoken, that one gets this feeling that when we throw these words at someone unprepared, the inner strength that should come when they are said has been taken from them. And we also harm ourselves if we use these terms without much thought, just when we feel like it in ordinary life. When we open our purse, for instance, and have to do with money, it is perfectly true that we are dealing with Ahrimanic powers. But it is not good to use the term Ahrimanic without much ado any time we like, for this deadens us in our sentience, our feelings, and we then do not have the least possibility of still having words which, when we think or speak them, have the elemental, significant meaning for us which they should have. It is extraordinarily significant that we do not fling such things about in everyday life, for this will indeed gradually deprive us of the best thing, the most effective thing that anthroposophy has to offer. The more we have the anthroposophical terms on our lips under everyday conditions, the more do we deprive ourselves of the possibility that anthroposophy becomes something for us that truly sustains the soul, enters deeply into our soul. We need only consider the force of habit, and we shall see that there is a difference if we use words such as aura, let us say, or Ahrimanic powers, or Luciferic powers, with a certain sense of awe, knowing that we are speaking of other worlds. If we always feel that we have to stop, as it were, before we use such words, using them only when it really is a matter for us of considering our relationship to the supersensible world, it will be something different from talking of these things of the higher world on any occasion in everyday life, having words that are taken from those worlds on our lips all the time. I had to give this introduction because in this particular session we want to refer to something in the human soul which should always be there in our conscious mind, but which we only consider in the right way if we do so with a certain sense of awe. Take the essay titled The Education of the Child in the Light of Anthroposophy, which is on this website. There it is shown, as it were, what happens as the human being develops through 7-year periods. It is shown that up to the 7th year to second dentition, we mainly have to do with the physical body development. And in the next period, from the 7th to the 14th year, up to sexual maturity, with development of the ether body, and so on. When we consider the way the human being develops in 7-year periods, you are mainly dealing with the things that the, in quotes, normal spirits of the higher hierarchies are causing to happen in human evolution. It is indeed forward-moving development in 7-year periods, and we are able to say the divine and spiritual powers that are truly forward-moving guide and govern this evolution in 7-year periods. If they alone were involved in human development, the whole of human life would take a different course than it actually does. Above all, people would relate in a very different way to young children. They would always have the feeling that a spiritual entity was speaking in a young child. Indeed, we would always feel that in everything they do, undertake, young children are receiving their impetus, their impulses from higher worlds. And people certainly would not feel anything other but that children are acting on far higher impulses than those which they themselves are able to penetrate with their intellect. And that would continue for a relatively long time. And people would then feel that the last thing they want is for children to be really clever in the human and earthly sense,